I wasn't fired, I was erased. No goodbye, no severance, just a revoked badge and a whisper campaign. So I spent the next year poaching their clients, rebranding their product better than they ever could, and waiting until the quarterly expo, where I unveiled my new company next to theirs, and watched every exec recognize me, and realize they were already losing. The badge didn't beep. That was the first sign. Not a meeting, not an email, not even the sterile smile of HR. Just a small red light, and a silence that stretched longer than it should have. I stood there, my hand still pressed against the scanner, like I could will the past to load again. Like I could force the machine to remember me. Behind me someone coughed. Then footsteps. I stepped aside, pretending to dig through my bag. Their badge worked. The door opened. They didn't hold it for me. No one ever does when you're about to become a ghost. I walked the long way around to the front desk, heart thudding, throat dry. Sylvia, the receptionist who used to text me about her exes at midnight, wouldn't meet my eyes. You might need to call IT, she said, already typing something that wasn't my name. I laughed too loud, too bright, trying to push back the rising dread like a drunk swatting a wasp. Yeah, probably just a sync issue. My badge acts up sometimes. It didn't. It never had. She nodded, still not looking at me, and her silence pressed against my ribs like a warning. I knew that look. I'd given that look, when someone higher up had decided a name didn't belong anymore. By the time I reached my desk, everything was gone. Not just the personal things, those were expected, boxed up by strangers with no context. But my files, my projects, my calendar, gone. As if I had never logged a single hour, never built the prototype that landed us our first seed round, never mentored the junior team that was now apparently managing without me. My computer showed a login screen that didn't accept my password. The sticky note with my name had been peeled off my monitor. In its place, a new one. A new name. I sat down anyway. Just for a moment. Just to see how long it would take someone to ask me to leave. It took 14 minutes. Mark, the VP of operations, approached with that cautious, apologetic tilt of the head people use when they know they're about to pretend something isn't their fault. Hey, he said, almost whispering like grief. Can we talk for a second? He gestured toward the hallway, not the conference room, not even the break room, just a quiet corner near the emergency exit. I followed. I didn't ask why. We both knew. He cleared his throat. There's been some restructuring. And unfortunately, your role has been impacted. Impacted. Like a meteor or a disease. He avoided the word fired the way addicts avoid mirrors. I stared at him for a long time before answering. Do I get a reason? He blinked. It's above me. I should have screamed. Should have cried. Should have demanded names and explanations and a damn severance package. But all I said was, okay. Because I'd already seen the future in Sylvia's eyes, in the red scanner light, in the way no one had texted me back all week. I left the building without my last paycheck, without closure, without so much as an exit interview. On the train home, I deleted the company Slack from my phone. I didn't look out the window. I didn't cry. I sat very still, feeling something under my skin rearrange itself into armor. Over the next few days, I waited for someone to reach out. For a message that said, "What happened?" Or "We miss you already." I had trained 3 of them from scratch, covered their mistakes, shielded them from boardroom fire. Nothing came. My inbox stayed empty, my phone silent. I wasn't just removed, I was erased. Not a trace left in the quarterly recap. Not a mention on the website. Even the company LinkedIn quietly unfollowed me. That's the trick with modern betrayals. They don't stab you in the back. They just rewrite the code so you never existed. I started keeping a journal that week. Not for healing. Not for closure. For evidence. I listed dates, decisions, projects. Snapshots of meetings. Features I'd designed. I went through old emails and downloaded what I could. Archived Slack threads. Performance reviews. I didn't know what I was building yet. Just that I'd need it. Just that they'd underestimated how quietly I could burn. The moment that sealed it, really sealed it, came 5 days later. A friend from a client company forwarded me a slide deck. Said he'd thought of me because the language felt familiar. It was my pitch. Word for word. The one I'd written during a 48-hour crunch, while running on cold coffee and grief, over my dad's heart attack. They hadn't even changed the typos. They'd presented it as new, as theirs. At a conference I was supposed to keynote before budget cuts removed me from the agenda. My vision, my story, my slide transitions, claimed by people who now acted like I had never been in the room. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't going to get over this. I wasn't going to move on. I wasn't going to take the high road and trust karma or whatever soft, polite nonsense people chant over overpriced wine. I was going to remember. I was going to rebuild. And when I came back, it wouldn't be for closure, it would be for dominance. No raised voice. No email wars. Just results. And the next time we were in the same room, they'd know it was already too late. I didn't rage. I didn't rant online. I didn't burn bridges or leave a clever trail of passive-aggressive breadcrumbs for future employers. I simply disappeared. I changed my number. Deleted every social media account tied to my name. The Gmail I'd used since college was wiped clean and shut down. I even paid a service to scrub me from data broker sites, as much as anyone can be erased in a digital world. It wasn't about hiding from them. It was about refusing to be found in the same skin they stripped me of. I didn't want to be recognized. Not yet. The first step was the name. Not legally, just where it counted. I went by Ria now. Short. Clean. Nobody's name from the past. I chose it because it sounded like a whisper you couldn't trace. Like the edge of a storm that hadn't touched down yet. With that, I started over. I applied for contracts under LLCs I'd quietly formed before the collapse. Things I had filed just in case. In tech, everyone has a side hustle, a backup domain, a barely used Upwork profile. Mine had just enough dust on it to pass as accidental. Just enough structure to carry the weight of what came next. I moved cities, not far, but far enough to change grocery stores, coffee shops, routines. My old apartment, with its water-stained ceiling and the creaky third stair I used to step over on instinct, was replaced by a high-rise rental I paid for in full, 6 months up front, with what remained of my severance less exit. Every box I packed felt like a ritual. I didn't label them. I didn't even unpack most of them when I arrived. I needed the blankness. I needed the silence. This was not a new beginning. It was a controlled burn. The first few weeks tasted like salt. Not from tears, I didn't cry, not really, but from the way my body refused to settle, like it knew we were in survival mode. I kept the blinds closed. Worked at odd hours. I slept on a mattress on the floor, next to a wall of post-it notes that looked chaotic but held my next life in scattered pieces. I kept a map of client contacts I'd remembered from memory, ones I'd personally onboarded, consulted, salvaged from disaster. Most of them didn't know I was gone yet. That was the key. That was the opening. My first outreach was cautious. A friendly hello. A nudge. Hey. Just in case you're looking for freelance UX or systems cleanup, I've branched out. No bitterness. No mention of where I'd been. Most responded within hours. 2 assumed I was still with the company. 1 asked if I'd be open to quietly advising on a competitor's platform. I smiled so hard my jaw ached. The difference between fired and free is thin. Sometimes it's just in who tells the story first. I learned how to work in the shadows. Contract work by day, strategy at night. I reverse engineered the very product I'd helped build. Except I stripped out the clutter, the politics, the executive bloat that had slowed it down. I kept the soul of it, the part that had been mine before they peeled it from my hands. I sketched features on my wall in permanent marker. Rewrote onboarding flows in my head while brushing my teeth. Rebuilt a cleaner, sleeker version under a new name, Keen Systems. A quiet nod to what they never were. I never posted about it. No splashy launch. No press release. Just steady growth under the radar, like mold under floorboards. The kind that ruins everything before anyone notices. I outsourced branding to a friend who owed me a favor. Paid in crypto. Designed the site to be untraceable to me. Every client NDA was airtight. Every Zoom call was background blurred. I didn't even speak on the first few calls. I hired someone else to pose as founder while I sat off screen, taking notes. It wasn't about ego. It was about control. People forget that vanishing isn't always retreat. Sometimes it's reconnaissance. Sometimes it's preparation. I watched from a distance as my old company announced a new pivot. A new direction. A product line I'd sketched on a napkin during an offsite they never credited me for. They were trying to grow without me. trying to scale something they didn't understand. And I knew with bone-deep certainty they'd fail. Not because they were evil, but because they were careless, arrogant. They thought I was replaceable, but they'd only taken my name off the slide deck. They hadn't taken the vision with it. One night around 3 a.m., I got an alert I hadn't meant to keep. A Google keyword tracker I forgot to delete. Pinged my old product name. I clicked. There it was. Their booth announcement for the upcoming West Coast Tech Expo. The same one I demoed at the year before. The same stage I had designed our launch visuals for. Booth number 117. Headlining sponsors. Press coverage. All under the banner of innovation, collaboration, and team growth. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a new tab and booked a booth. Right next to theirs. I used a different company name. A new address. A new founder bio. But I picked booth number 118 with surgical clarity. They wouldn't know it was me, not yet. But they would. When they saw the interface. When they recognized the pitch cadence. When they watched the clients they thought they owned drift across the aisle. They would know. Not all at once. But slowly, like dawn seeping in under blackout curtains. That's the kind of revenge I wanted. Not rage. Recognition. And that night, before I finally let myself sleep, I pinned my old company badge to the corkboard above my bed. A reminder. Not of the betrayal, but of the silence that followed it. The void they left me in. The space I filled without them. I didn't know who I was without the company, until I started building something I didn't have to apologize for. In the beginning it felt like I was imitating someone smarter than me, more ruthless. I'd sit at my desk in the dark, whispering my own business name aloud like it might anchor me to something real. Keen Systems. Keen. Clean. Sharp. Focused. The opposite of everything they had become. Every decision I made was a stitch in new skin. The kind that didn't bruise. The kind that remembered every cut. I learned more in those 6 months than I had in 6 years under their roof. How to balance a profit sheet. How to negotiate licensing without blinking first. How to code through exhaustion and make decisions with no safety net. I stopped asking for feedback. I started making bets. Not because I was confident, but because I'd already lost everything they could take. Fear became data. Doubt became design. I built my product in silence and launched it in shadows, testing it with small clients who didn't care about backstory. Only results. Only speed. The first version of the product wasn't perfect. It glitched. It lagged. But it solved problems faster than theirs did, because it wasn't bloated by the committee thinking I used to drown in. I built lean. I built brutal. I took feedback with a scalpel, not a smile. When one early client tried to talk down the price, I sent them screenshots of metrics improving in real time. You're not paying for a tool, I said. You're paying for results no one else can deliver. They signed the next day. I didn't feel proud. I felt surgical. There were nights I didn't sleep. Not out of panic anymore, but out of obsession. The work took over. There were no office hours, no off switch, no one to disappoint but myself. I used to be the person who said yes too easily, who smiled through belittling meetings, who absorbed blame like a sponge. That version of me was dead. In her place was someone whose voice didn't tremble on client calls, whose contracts were airtight, who never circled back. I became someone I would have feared a year ago, and I liked her. But even transformation leaves bruises. One night, I caught myself typing my old login into a portal I hadn't used in months. Muscle memory. A ghost reaching back. The error message hit like a flash of cold water. User not recognized. I stared at it, finger still on the enter key. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. I wasn't that user anymore. I wasn't theirs. Not even a record in the system. And that somehow was the cleanest wound I'd ever carried. The kind that doesn't hurt. Just scars. The people who had once circled me like satellites were gone. No more happy hours. No more just checking in messages. I had colleagues now, not friends. Contractors, not confidants. And still, I checked LinkedIn once a week to see if they'd failed yet. They hadn't. But they hadn't grown either. Their latest blog post was a rehash of one I'd written 2 years ago, dressed up in new fonts. Their team photo had changed. 2 of the people I trained had been promoted. One looked miserable. The other looked smug. I didn't feel envy. I felt precision. I started marking time and micro wins. A new client signed without negotiation. A feature shipped early. A rival company tried to reverse engineer our beta and failed. Every win was a stitch. Every silence was a salve. I stopped checking my phone first thing in the morning. I started lifting again. Cooking again. Things I used to do when I thought life was linear. It wasn't. It was circular. Burn. Regrow. Burn again. The old me had seen pain as failure. The new me understood it as evolution. Scar tissue. Stronger than what came before. There was one conversation I kept replaying in my head. Something my old CEO once said during a strategy offsite, back when I still believed in the myth of we. She'd been talking about legacy. Your value isn't in what you build, she'd said, sipping her designer coffee. It's in whether people know you built it.
I det nådde like I understood.
But now, a year later, I saw the rot in that sentence. Ego over impact. Visibility over utility. She thought names mattered more than results. That was her weakness. I would make it my weapon. I didn't plan revenge the way movies portray it. There was no montage.
No playlist.
No red strings on a wall. Just systems. Structure. I rebuilt my entire approach from the bones up. A CRM designed to remember every client touchpoint. A dev cycle that iterated twice as fast as industry standard. AI testing modules with custom datasets. And under it all, my name, hidden in metadata, encrypted in version histories, embedded where no one could erase it without destroying the code itself. I didn't need credit anymore. I had ownership. And one night, as the wind howled outside my new apartment and my inbox chimed with a partnership request from a Fortune 100 company, one they'd spent years trying to woo, I let myself smile. Not wide. Not victorious. Just sharp. Just aware. This was the pivot point. The scar had hardened. The pain had become pattern. And now I wasn't building for survival. I was building for war. Not loud. Not public. Just inevitable. The booth looked harmless. White walls. Soft gray carpeting. A matte black sign with Keen Systems in clean Helvetica. All lowercase. Minimalist. Unassuming. The kind of aesthetic that startups use when they want to look like they've already made it. I stood beside it in a tailored black blazer. Hair pulled back, lips neutral. No name badge. Just a simple lanyard with a QR code that led to a silent landing page. There was nothing flashy. Nothing loud. Just me. Just presence. And across the aisle, booth 117 was everything I used to believe in, polished and rotten. They didn't recognize me at first. That was the gift of silence. A year away and 20 pounds lighter. Posture sharpened by decision-making instead of diplomacy. Their eyes slid across me like I was part of the staging. Maybe a freelance brand rep, maybe marketing support. I watched their booth team arrange branded water bottles and projection screens and force smiles. The new head of product was the intern I'd once walked through his first API review. He didn't look at me. He looked at my booth. Twice. The second time, his forehead furrowed. I said nothing. That was part of it. I stood like a sculpture, still alert, untouchable.
No pamphlets.
No sales pitch. Just a looping product demo running on a silent screen behind me. Clean UI. Fluid motion. Familiar architecture but streamlined. Every element designed to echo something they'd claimed, but with frictionless improvement. It wasn't theft. It was evolution. And the people walking past, investors, engineers, potential clients, could feel it. They didn't need to ask. Their bodies knew. That intuitive lean-in that happens when something just works. The first client to cross the aisle was someone I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Amanda from Telluric Labs, sharp, skeptical, always 5 steps ahead. We'd worked together before, back when I was still attached to them. Back when I still said we instead of they. She looked at the screen. Then at me. A beat passed. "This is yours, isn't it?" she asked quietly. Not as a challenge, but as an acknowledgement. I met her gaze and smiled. "Yes," I said. "No beats. No defense. Just truth." She nodded once and scanned the QR code. 10 minutes later, she'd set a meeting. That's how it started. Not with noise but with gravity. One by one. The people they used to charm wandered toward me like they couldn't help it. They lingered longer. Asked smarter questions. The booth beside mine started to stiffen. Their smiles tightened. I watched my old CEO approach from the far end of the expo floor. flanked by 2 junior reps and a clipboard she didn't need. She glanced toward our side, then paused. I saw the flicker of recognition hit like a misfired neural signal. Her eyes widened for half a second. Then she adjusted her posture and kept walking. But the doubt had landed. I stayed silent. The man running their demo began raising his voice. Overcompensating. He added buzzwords that didn't make sense. Seamless scalability. Blockchain-adjacent intelligence. Nonsense. Noise. The kind of pitch that tries to distract from the decay underneath. My booth stayed quiet. Clients asked questions. I answered cleanly.
No jargón.
Just outcomes. Just data. There was a power in not trying to be liked. I wasn't offering a personality. I was offering precision. And the people who mattered saw the difference. Midway through day 1, a junior developer from their side wandered over during lunch. A girl I'd once helped rewrite her first Git commit. She didn't say hi. Just looked at the screen for a while, arms crossed, chewing her lip. Then she asked, "Is this based on?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I turned slightly, just enough to let the screen reflect in my eyes. "No," I said. "It's what it should have been." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly and walked away with something unresolved in her face. I didn't go to the after parties. Didn't schmooze. I left each night quietly, boarded the shuttle like any other vendor, earbuds in, face neutral. But in my hotel room, I tracked the metrics. Booth traffic, click-throughs, lead submissions. Keen was outpacing them 3-1. And on day 2, someone from their board hovered nearby for 15 minutes, not speaking, just observing. I pretended not to notice, but I noted the watch, the shoes, the hesitation, the whisper between him and the CEO when they finally made eye contact again. Something was slipping in their posture. They didn't know how much they'd already lost. It was during a panel session on innovation and disruption that I saw it. The final crack. One of their senior leads stood up to ask a question about competitive overlaps in interface design. The moderator redirected it to me. I didn't flinch. "Great question," I said. "We're always looking for ways to improve based on market demand. The interface isn't about competition. It's about clarity. Users don't care who invented the window. They care if it opens." The audience laughed softly. The lead sat down, his ears red. My CEO didn't look at me again for the rest of the expo. That night, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "You made your point. What do you want?" I stared at the screen, pulse steady, thumb hovering over reply. Then I archived it. I hadn't made my point yet. Not fully. They still thought I wanted recognition. That this was about revenge. It wasn't. This was about something colder. Displacement. And I was just getting started. Started with the brochure. A cheap printout, hastily folded, half stuffed into a stack of handouts from booth 117. I wasn't supposed to see it. I doubt they intended it to land in my hands. But by the second morning of the expo, a curious venture analyst passed by my booth, thumbing through the materials he'd gathered. He paused at the brochure, squinted, and then held it up. "Hey, isn't this your layout?" he asked. I glanced at it. Top folded tri-panel, exact same demo flow, nearly identical terminology. Except for one thing. They'd repackaged my product demo and called it Next Gen. My mouth stayed shut, but something sharp moved behind my ribs. I took the brochure, studied it for a full 5 seconds, then smiled without my eyes. "Looks familiar," I said. Then I passed it back casually, as if I hadn't just been handed an unlicensed clone of the work I'd spent a year burying myself to build. He walked off. I stayed still. Inside, something started sliding into place. They weren't just competing anymore. They were imitating. And badly. Which meant they were panicking. And I had just been handed their mistake. I made one phone call. Just one. A quiet lawyer out of Chicago I'd worked with on my IP filings. An intro from a contractor who swore she was discreet and bloodless. I sent her a photo of the brochure, along with a timestamp and booth number. 2 hours later, a cease and desist notice was delivered to their expo rep's inbox. I didn't sign it under my name. It came from Keen Systems' legal desk. There was nothing loud, nothing public. But I watched from 12 feet away. As the team across the aisle read the email, paled, and shut down their screen for technical difficulties. Later that afternoon, the CEO approached. Not directly, she sent a proxy. Ryan, the same executive who'd once called me a stabilizing presence in an unstable vertical. Like it was a compliment. He looked older now. More brittle. His suit hung differently, less intentional, more like armor that no longer fit. He asked to speak privately. I declined. You can talk here, I said. The booth wasn't crowded. Just one quiet product lead reviewing specs. But Ryan's discomfort was immediate. He shifted his weight, then cleared his throat. We think there's been some miscommunication, he started, tone measured. The team wasn't aware of the similarities. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? The metadata in your assets still carries my original naming conventions. My lawyer counted 6 instances. That's not a coincidence. That's a copy-paste. His jaw tightened. We'd like to resolve this amicably. You should have thought of that before printing lies, I said, still level. No raised voice. Just impact. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. I watched him flinch when I didn't break eye contact. That was the first real acknowledgement. Not of the product. Of me. They weren't ready for this version of me. The one who no longer translated discomfort into politeness. The one who no longer needed to justify her presence. After Ryan left, I updated the product page on our landing site. Quietly added a section titled, Legacy DNA. A clean bullet list of features first built by our team, with date-stamped patents linked below. I didn't name them. I didn't have to. Anyone paying attention could do the math. My inbox spiked that night. Curious investors, old clients, journalists asking if I had any public comment. I didn't respond. Not yet. On day 3, the real confrontation happened. Not in a press room or a headline, but in the accidental intimacy of a restroom hallway. My former CEO stood at the mirror, reapplying lipstick with surgical precision. She didn't acknowledge me at first. Just kept dabbing. Then she said without turning, "You always were good at building. You just weren't built for the spotlight." I leaned against the opposite wall. Funny. Looks like the spotlight found me anyway. She finally faced me. Her expression was unreadable, but her hand shook just slightly as she capped the lipstick. What do you want? It was the question everyone kept asking, as if this was about a single clean desire. Revenge. Recognition. Power. It wasn't. Not anymore. What I wanted wasn't something I could say aloud, because it wasn't about them at all. Not really. It was about me, and the version of me that had died in their hallway a year ago, standing there with a dead badge and a silence no one would explain. I wanted to bury her, to leave her in their lobby and walk away not as a survivor, but as someone reborn by her own fire. So I didn't answer her question. I stepped past her, paused just long enough for the moment to stretch, then said over my shoulder, "You'll know what I wanted when you see the exit reports." Her reflection faltered in the mirror. I didn't wait to watch her recover. By the time the expo ended, Keen Systems had signed 12 clients. 7 of them were former partners of my old company. 3 had cited uncertainty in product direction as their reason. 2 had flat out said they preferred our team. The final signature came from a government contractor whose rep had originally been scheduled to tour booth 117 and cross the aisle mid-pitch. I didn't gloat. I didn't toast. I shut down the booth in silence, packed my materials with clinical precision, and slipped out the side entrance while the others posed for closing day photos. That night, my inbox lit up again. Another anonymous message. This time from a burner account. "How long have you been planning this?" No name. No context. Just a sentence full of dread. I didn't answer. I saved it. I liked the fear in it. Because now, finally, they understood I hadn't come to get even. I'd come to replace them. It started, as most downfalls do, with silence. Not dramatic press releases or public scandals, just the absence of noise where there should have been certainty. The first signal came in the form of a headline buried beneath tech earnings updates. Mid-tier startup faces unexpected partner exodus after West Coast Expo. No names. Just whispers. But I recognized the phrasing. I knew the journalist. I briefed him years ago, back when I was still wearing their badge and pitching their vision like it was my own. He'd reached out again the week after the expo. I hadn't replied. He didn't need me to. The second sign was an email from a former junior engineer. One of the quiet ones. The kind who took notes obsessively, never spoke in meetings unless asked, and always followed up with a thank you message no matter how badly they were treated. Her subject line: I owe you something. She'd attached screenshots, internal messages, Slack threads, meeting notes, conversations about my removal, backdated to a full month before it happened. Thought you should see it, she wrote. I didn't know at the time. But I know now. I didn't reply. I archived the message, but I read it more than once. Then came the drop in their hiring pipeline. Job listings quietly pulled, recruitment partners disconnected. A friend who ran a niche industry job board mentioned they'd been approached with a sudden flood of resumes from mid-level product managers looking to pivot. I asked no questions. I just logged the data point. I was building a map, not for revenge, not anymore, but for understanding. For autopsy. Because this wasn't just a company collapsing. It was a system unwinding. A belief system I had once belonged to, now choking on its own rot. Investor meetings shifted next. I didn't have to attend to hear the fallout. People talk. People whisper. And some of those people owed me small, quiet favors. They're bleeding confidence, one told me. No one's saying it, but everyone's asking the same thing. Why does Keen Systems look more like the original vision? Another text came from an angel investor I pitched 3 years ago. One who passed on us but stayed friendly. They tried to license your demo language, he said. Offered equity if I helped clean the overlap. It felt desperate. I responded with a single emoji. The eyes. He didn't text again. Their internal layoffs weren't public, but I saw the signs. LinkedIn updates with vague new directions, profile changes to seeking new opportunities, and startup veterans suddenly liking posts about burnout and exit strategies. One by one, the faces I used to pass in hallways became loose pixels online, detached from context, floating. I didn't feel joy. I felt clarity. This was the price of erasure. The cost of building on someone else's bones. And now those bones were showing through the skin. And then came the leak. Not from me. That was the part that mattered most. The expose that hit Medium was from someone on the inside. It detailed toxic leadership, blurred ethical lines, investor overreach. But the heart of it was something different. An unnamed whistleblower describing how their original product lead, the visionary behind their beta build, had been removed without explanation during a critical growth phase. The article didn't say my name, but it quoted phrases I had coined, internal references only a handful of people knew. My inbox exploded. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They issued a statement. Flat. Hollow. Full of corporate phrasing. We are aware of the article and are conducting an internal review. But the market didn't wait. A minor investor pulled out. 2 strategic partners paused contracts. And on a private tech forum, someone posted screenshots of side-by-side comparisons. Their interface next to mine. Time-stamped. Tagged. The comments didn't go viral. They didn't need to. The right people saw them. The right people understood. That week, I received a voicemail from my old mentor. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She sounded tired. Said she'd always admired how I kept building no matter what. Then she added something strange. You're not who they think you are. You never were. I replayed that line a dozen times. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a warning. Maybe both. Maybe that's what transformation costs, the ability to be known. Internally, I could feel something shift. Not guilt. Not regret. But a kind of ache. Not because I missed them. But because this version of me didn't mourn. Didn't react. Didn't soften. I was sharper now. Every conversation felt like calculus. Every move planned 6 steps ahead. I had become efficient. Unapologetic. Surgical. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped dreaming of a future where they apologized. I no longer needed their reckoning. I was their reckoning. But still I kept the voicemail. Not as sentiment. As a reminder. That I hadn't always been this. By the end of the month their valuation dropped. Not by much but enough. Enough to trigger clauses. Enough to raise questions on calls with firms who didn't like volatility. They released a pivot statement. Refocusing on core competencies. I laughed when I read it. It was the corporate equivalent of a funeral announcement that refused to name the dead. The industry moved on. Slowly. But it moved. And Keen Systems? We doubled our active contracts in 6 weeks. Hired 5 new developers. Turned down 2 acquisition offers. We weren't loud. We were undeniable. And yet, I wasn't done. There was still one file unopened. One loose thread in the story they didn't know I had pulled. And it was almost time. But not yet. I waited 6 weeks to open the file. 6 weeks since the expo. 6 weeks since the cease and desist turned into silence. 6 weeks of steady client growth, expanding team calls and inboxes too full to manage. But the file stayed untouched. It sat on my desktop like a bruise I didn't want to press. Transfer log_17b.xml. I'd pulled it from a backup drive the same night the junior engineer sent me screenshots of my removal. It had been buried inside a legacy folder from the early days. Back when I still believed in their mission. It shouldn't have existed. But it did. When I finally opened it, the first name I saw wasn't mine. It was Isha's. She'd been on the intern track 2 summers under my wing. I'd pushed for her hire. Fought for her spot when budgets got tight. She was sharp, fast, the kind of person who saw systems like patterns in the wind. Quiet but bright. She used to call me her career anchor. Which I hated. Too much pressure. Too much hope. But I'd let her. She was still finishing her degree when she joined the company full-time. And then, just months before they erased me, she vanished.
No goodbye.
No LinkedIn update. Just disappeared. At the time I thought she'd left voluntarily. Burnout maybe. Or family issues. But the file told a different story. Termination logged. IP flagged for security redundancy. Project access rescinded same day. The same day I pitched her integration module in a product review as my own. Because I thought it would get rejected if her name was on it. Because they told me to consolidate. To streamline. I hadn't realized. I hadn't looked. I just complied. I sat there for a long time staring at her name. Then the access logs. Then the timestamp that showed how for days later, she'd emailed HR asking for clarification and never received a reply. My stomach twisted. I had been so focused on my own erasure that I hadn't seen the footprint I left on hers. And maybe that's the hardest part about revenge. When you realize you weren't the only one who got hurt. The knock came that same night. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was late, 9:17 p.m. I watched through the peephole for a full 30 seconds before opening the door. It was her. Isha. Older. Different. But unmistakable. She didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Just said, "Took you long enough." I stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the air between us. She wore a gray coat. No bag. Nothing to prove. I poured 2 glasses of water and set one in front of her. Neither of us drank. "I thought you disappeared," I said finally. "I did," she replied. "Because you didn't stop them." That line sliced cleaner than anything legal ever could. I didn't respond. I couldn't. "I sent the file," she added. I stared at her. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who still had a voice loud enough to burn them. And quiet enough to get away with it." She leaned forward. "You built the storm. But I gave you the match." It was true. All of it. She'd been the one leaking to the reporter. She'd fed the screenshots to the engineer. She'd sat back and watched me dismantle the company she once dreamed of joining. Brick by strategic brick. And I'd never even known I was building on her ash. "I didn't know," I said. She laughed, short and bitter. "That's always the line, isn't it?" There was nothing I could say. No clever defense. No moral high ground. I had taken what she built and attached my name to it. Not because I wanted credit, but because I was too busy surviving to see who I was stepping over. "You want to know what the real revenge is?" she said, standing. "It's that they'll never know who really started this. You'll get the credit. You'll build the future. I'll just be another ghost in their system." She walked toward the door. Paused. Then looked back at me. "You got your rebirth," she said. "Don't waste it." And then she was gone. I sat in silence for an hour. Maybe 2. The apartment felt unfamiliar. Every object around me looked like a monument to someone else's ambition. My own included. I pulled up the patent index. The code. The feature trees. All the architecture I thought I built from scratch. And in the spaces between, her fingerprints. Her logic. Her DNA. And I hadn't seen it. Not because I was blind, but because I was looking at my own wounds, not hers. The unraveling wasn't theirs. It was mine. Everything I'd done, every step, every fire lit, every cold conversation, was shaped by a truth I hadn't faced until now. I wasn't just trying to beat them. I was trying to prove to myself I hadn't become them. Now, I wasn't so sure. I didn't sleep the night Isha left. I lay on the couch with my badge in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through old photos like they belonged to someone else. Office happy hours. Strategy whiteboards. Snapshots of the startup days back when we still believed in the myth of culture, of mission, of we're all in this together. In most of them, I wasn't even in the frame. Just pieces of my handwriting. My post-it notes. My shadow on the glass wall of a boardroom I never got credit for. Erasure has many forms. So does complicity. The next morning, I deleted every saved version of the file. Transferlog_17b.xml. I didn't need it anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because I finally understood that evidence alone doesn't equal justice. The file couldn't give Isha her time back. It couldn't rewrite the months she spent watching her work be harvested, anonymized, and resold under a brand she once admired. What she needed, what I needed, was something more dangerous than proof. A choice. And I was finally ready to make mine. I opened the dashboard for Keen Systems and typed a single sentence into the press portal. We built this from scar tissue. Then I drafted a quiet internal memo. No drama. No grand gestures. Just a restructure. A redistribution. 22% of the original architecture, based on models I'd built off Isha's framework, would be forked into an open-source module. Her module. I didn't name her. Not in the public log. But I embedded her initials in the version history, in the commit note. I did it with intention. Not for credit. For legacy. She'd said she didn't want the spotlight. Fine. But I could still rebuild the room around her shadow. Then I turned to the badge. The original one. The one that hadn't beeped. It was pinned above my desk like a wound that had never stopped bleeding. I took it down slowly, held it in my hand. It weighed less than I remembered. I turned it over. The back was still smudged with fingerprints. My own maybe. Or someone else's from the day they revoked it and didn't look me in the eye. I slipped it into a padded envelope. No note. Just the badge. Addressed it to the corporate office I hadn't set foot in for 14 months. It didn't need words. The silence would do the speaking for me. Later that day, I wiped the QR code off our booth demo site. Replaced it with something quieter. A single button. We're already building what's next. No founder bio. No team page. Just the product. The impact. The results. The way it always should have been. I didn't need to be the face anymore. Not because I was afraid of being seen, but because I finally understood that survival isn't always about staying visible. Sometimes it's about making yourself unnecessary. That's when you know you've won. I spent the evening alone. No champagne. No inbox. No performance dashboards. Just a rooftop chair, a glass of cold water, and the city breathing below me. I watched the lights blink in windows I'd never live in. Listened to sirens that didn't belong to me. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't strategizing. I wasn't writing silent emails in my head. I wasn't planning the next strike. I was just still. And that stillness told me something I hadn't wanted to hear until now. I didn't need to win again. I didn't need the next expo or the next market share or the next revenge. I had already crossed the finish line. And it was behind me. My revenge had been too complete to sustain itself. There was no one left to chase. No one left to outmaneuver. Just me. And the pieces of who I used to be. In the morning I sent one final message. To Isha. Just 2 lines. You were right. I see it now. The storm didn't make me. It revealed me. No reply. I didn't expect one. That was the point. Closure isn't about response. It's about release. I shut down my laptop. Took the rest of the day off. Walked through the park without earbuds, just letting the wind speak. Letting the silence settle. I watched a kid fall off her scooter, watched her mom scoop her up, brush off her knees, say something soft. The kid nodded. Got back on. Wobbled forward. That, I thought, is the real revenge. Not success. Not dominance. Resilience. If you've ever been discarded, overlooked, or underestimated, This story was for you. Quiet power is still power. Subscribe for more stories where revenge isn't loud, it's surgical. See you soon in the next story.